Fundamental Education by Samael Aun Weor. Chapter 1. Free Initiative. Millions of students throughout the world go to school and university daily in an unconscious, mechanical and subjective way, without knowing why or for what purpose. Students are forced to study mathematics, physics, chemistry, geography, etc. Students' minds are receiving information daily, however. In life it never occurs to them to think for a while the reason of such information and its objective. Why and for what purpose do we feed ourselves with that information? Students really live a mechanical life and only know that they have to receive intellectual information and store it in their unfaithful memory, that is all. It never occurs to students to think about what education really is. They go to school, college, and university because their parents say so. It never occurs to students or teachers to ask themselves, why am I here? What have I come here for? What really is the true secret motivation which brings me here? Teachers and students live with their conscience asleep. They really act as machines, going to school, college, university, in an unconscious and subjective way, without really knowing why or for what reason. It is necessary to stop being machines, to awaken conscience and discover for ourselves what does it mean, this utterly terrifying struggle of passing exams, living at a certain place to study daily and spend the whole year going through worries, anguishes, and painful moments, practicing sports, going through arguments, fighting with fellow students, etc. Teachers should become more conscious in order to help students to awaken their conscience, be it at school, college, or university. It is regrettable to see so many machines seated at desks, in schools, colleges, and universities, receiving information that they have to memorize, without knowing why or for what purpose. Young people are only worried about getting through and finishing the school year. They have been told they should prepare themselves to earn a living, get a job, etc. They study building up 1,000 fantasies about the future without really knowing the present moment, without knowing the true reason for studying physics, chemistry, biology, arithmetic, geography, etc. Modern girls study to prepare themselves to find a good husband, to earn a living and be duly prepared in case they are abandoned, widowed, or never marry. Pure fantasies of the mind, because, in fact, they do not know what the future holds for them nor at what age will they die. Life at school is very vague, incoherent, and subjective. Children are forced to learn certain subjects which are worthless in everyday life. Nowadays, what is important at school is getting through the year's course, and that is all. In the past, there was at least something ethical in passing a year's course. Now, such ethics do not exist. Parents can secretly bribe teachers. Even if a boy or girl is an extremely bad student, she will inevitably pass the year. Schoolgirls often sweeten male teachers with the purpose of passing the school year, and the result is usually marvelous, even when they have not understood anything about what was taught by the teacher. By all means, they do well in their examinations and pass the school year. There are students who are very clever at passing a school year. This is a matter of tricks and astuteness in many cases. For a student who successfully passes a certain examination, some stupid examination, it does not mean that he has a true objective conscience about the subject in which he was examined. A student repeats in a mechanical way, like a parrot, the subject he studied and which he was examined in. That does not mean we are conscious of that subject, but that means to memorize and repeat like a parrot or chatterbox what we have learnt, and that is all. To pass an examination and get through a year does not mean we are very intelligent. In everyday life we have known very intelligent people who never did well in examinations at school. We have known magnificent writers and great mathematicians who were very bad students at school and never did well in grammar and mathematics examinations. We know a case of a very bad student in anatomy who was only able to do well in anatomy examinations after much suffering. Today, that student is the author of a popular book on anatomy. To pass a school year does not necessarily mean we are very intelligent. There are people who have never passed a school year, and they are very intelligent. There is something more important than passing a school year and studying certain subjects, that is precisely to have full objective conscience, clear and luminous, about those subjects being studied. Teachers should exert themselves to help students to awaken their conscience. They should direct all their efforts to the conscience of students. It is imperative for students to have a full conscience about the subjects they study. To learn by heart, like parrots, is simply stupid in the most complete sense of the word. Students are forced to study difficult subjects and to store them in their memory to pass a school year. Afterwards, in everyday life, these subjects are not only useless, but are also forgotten because the memory is unfaithful. Young people study with the purpose of obtaining a job and earning their living. Later, if they are lucky, they get their desired job. If they become professionals, doctors, lawyers, etc., they will only repeat the same story as always. They marry, have children, and suffer. They die without awakening conscience, without having conscience of their own life. Girls marry, have their homes, children, argue with their neighbors, husband and children, divorce, remarry, become widows, grow old, etc. In the end, they die after having lived asleep, unconscious, repeating the same painful drama of existence as usual. Teachers do not want to accept the fact that all human beings have their conscience asleep. It is imperative for teachers to awaken their conscience so that they can help to awaken the student's conscience. It is useless to fill our heads with more and more theories and to quote Dante, Homer, Virgil, etc., if our conscience is sleeping, if we do not have a clear and objective conscience about ourselves, the subjects we study, and everyday life. What is the use of education if we do not become creative, conscious, and truly intelligent? Real education does not mean knowing how to read and write. Any stupid person, any fool can know how to read and write. We need to have intelligence, and it only awakens within us when the conscience awakens. Mankind has 97% of subconsciousness and 3% of conscience. We need to awaken conscience in order to turn the subconscious into conscious and achieve 100% of conscience. A human being not only dreams when his physical body sleeps, but also dreams when his physical body does not sleep, when he is in a state of wakefulness. It is necessary to stop dreaming, to awaken conscience, and that awakening process should begin at home and school. Teachers' efforts should be directed to students' conscience and not just to the memory. Students should learn to think for themselves and not only repeat others' theories like parrots or chatterboxes. Teachers should struggle to put an end to fear in students. Teachers should allow their students freedom to disagree and healthily criticize, in a constructive manner, all theories that are studied. It is absurd to force them to accept in a dogmatic way all the theories taught in school, college, and university. It is necessary and imperative for students to abandon fear, to be able to think for themselves and analyze theories which they study. Fear is one of the barriers to intelligence. Students with fear do not dare to disagree and blindly accept, as articles of faith, whatever different authors say. It is useless for teachers to talk about fearlessness if they are fearful. Teachers should be free of fear. Teachers who fear criticism, what people say, etc., cannot be truly intelligent. The true objective of education should be to awaken conscience and put an end to fear. Want is the use of passing examinations if we continue being afraid and unconscious? Teachers have the duty to help students at their school desks to become useful in life, but as long as fear exists, no one can be useful in life. A person full of fear does not dare to disagree with other people's opinion. A person full of fear cannot have free initiative. Clearly, every teacher's duty is to help each of his students in school to become completely free of fear so that they can act spontaneously without the need to be told or ordered. When students, by their own free and spontaneous initiative, can freely analyze and criticize the theories they study, they will stop being mere subjective and stupid, mechanical entities. It is imperative for free initiative to exist so that the student's creative intelligence emerges. It is necessary to give to students the freedom of spontaneous creative expression, without any type of conditioning, so that they become conscious of what they study. Free creative power can only manifest itself when we do not fear criticism, what people say, teachers' authority, rules, etc. The human mind is degenerated by fear and dogmatism. and it is imperative to regenerate it through spontaneous free initiative, devoid of fear. We need to become conscious of our own life, and that process of awakening should begin at school desks. School will be of very little use to us if we leave it in an unconscious and asleep state. Free initiative and the removal of fear will give rise to spontaneous and pure action. Through free initiative, students in every school should have the right to discuss in assembly all the theories they are studying. Only in this way, through liberation from fear and freedom of discussion, analysis, meditation, and health criticism of what we study, can we become conscious of subjects and not be merely like parrots or chatterboxes that repeat what they accumulate in their memory. Chapter 2. Imitation. It has already been totally demonstrated that fear stops free initiative. The bad financial situation of millions of people is, beyond any doubt, due to fear. A fearful boy seeks his dear mother and becomes attached to her in search for security. A fearful husband becomes attached to his wife and feels that he loves her even more. A frightened wife feels attached to her husband and children and thinks she loves them much more. From the psychological point of view, it is strange and interesting to see how fear often disguises itself in love's clothing. People who have very little spiritual values within, who are internally poor, always seek something external to make themselves complete. Internally poor people are always worried about foolishness, gossip, bestial pleasures, etc. Internally poor people live from fear to fear and, as it is natural, become attached to their husband, wife, parents, children, to old and degenerated traditions, etc. Every sick and poor psychologically old man is usually full of fear and clings with infinite anxiety to money, family traditions, grandchildren, memories, etc., as if seeking security. This is something we can all see by carefully observing old people. Whenever people are afraid, they hide behind the protective shield of respectability, by following a tradition of race, family, or nation, etc. Actually, every tradition is merely a senseless repetition, empty and without true value. All people have a marked tendency to imitate others, and this imitating is a product of fear. People with fear imitate all those to whom they become attached. They imitate husbands, wives, children, brothers, friends who protect them, etc. Imitation is the result of fear and totally destroys free initiative. In schools, colleges, and universities, teachers make the mistake of teaching through imitation. In painting and drawing lessons, students are taught to copy images of trees, houses, mountains, animals, etc. That is not creating, that is imitating, taking a picture. Creating is not imitating or taking a picture. To create is to translate and vividly transmit with a brush, a tree that enchants us, a beautiful sunset, a dawn with its ineffable melodies, etc. There is true creation in Chinese and Japanese Zen art, both abstract and semi-abstract. Any Chinese painter of Chan and Zen is not interested in imitating, taking pictures. Painters of China and Japan enjoy creating again and again. Painters of Zen and Chan do not imitate, they create, and this is their work. Painters of China and Japan are not interested in painting or taking a picture of a beautiful woman. They enjoy transmitting her abstract beauty. Painters of China and Japan would never imitate a sunset. They enjoy transmitting in abstract beauty all the enchantment of sunset. What is important is not to imitate, to copy in black or white. What is important is to feel the deep meaning of beauty and know how to transmit it, but for that, it is necessary not to be afraid, attachment to rules, traditions, fear of what people might say, or fear of the teacher's reprimand. It is imperative that teachers understand the necessity for students to develop creative power. It is clearly absurd to teach students to imitate. It is better to teach them to create. Unfortunately, human beings are unconscious, sleeping machines, who only know how to imitate. We imitate other people's clothes, and out of that imitation emerge the different trends of fashion. We imitate other people's customs even when they are mistaken. We imitate vices, we imitate all that which is absurd and that which is always repeated throughout time, etc. It is necessary for teachers to teach their students how to think independently. Teachers should give their students all possibilities, in order that they stop being mechanical imitators. Teachers should provide the best opportunities available for students to develop creative power. It is imperative for students to know true freedom so that they learn to think independently and without fear at all. A mind which lives enslaved to what people may say, a mind which imitates. Because of fear of violating traditions, rules, customs, etc., is not a creative mind, neither a free mind. People's mind is like a house, closed and sealed with 7 seals. A house where nothing new can happen, where the sun does not shine, where only death and pain reigns. The new can only take place when fear does not exist, when both imitation and attachment to things, money, people, traditions, customs, etc., do not exist. People live enslaved to plotting, envy, family customs, habits, the insatiable desire to conquer positions, climb to the top, make themselves felt, etc. It is imperative for teachers to teach their students the necessity of not imitating this degenerate and out-of-date order of time-worn things. It is imperative that students learn to create, think, and feel freely in school. Students spend the best part of their lives at school acquiring information, and yet they do not have time left to think about all these things. 10 or 15 years at school living a mechanical and unconscious life. They leave school with their conscience asleep yet believing themselves to be awake. The human mind lives bottled up between conservative and reactionary ideas. Human beings cannot think with true freedom because they are full of fear. Human beings fear life, death, what people say or might sat, they fear gossip, losing their jobs, breaking regulations, or someone taking away their partners, etc. At school we are taught to imitate, and we leave school after having been transformed into imitators. We do not have free initiative because from our school desks, we were taught to imitate. People imitate because of fear of what other people might say. Students imitate because teachers terrorize them, they threaten them with low marks, specific punishments, and expulsion, etc. We really want to become creative in the most complete sense of the word, we should become conscious of all those imitations which unfortunately have us trapped. When we are already capable of knowing all those imitations, and have very closely analyzed each of them, we become conscious of them, and as a logical consequence, the power to create is spontaneously born within us. It is necessary for students at school, colleges, and universities to free themselves from all imitation so that they become truly creative. Teachers who erroneously assume that students need to imitate in order to learn are mistaken. Whoever imitates does not learn but becomes a machine, and that is all. It is not a case of imitation what authors of geography, physics, arithmetic, history, etc. say. To imitate, memorize, repeat like chatterboxes or parrots is stupid. It is better to consciously understand what we are studying. Fundamental education is the science of the conscience which allows us to discover our relationship with human beings, nature, and everything. A mind which only knows how to imitate is mechanical, is a machine which functions, incapable of creating, it does not truly think, and only repeats, that is all. Teachers should be concerned about the awakening of conscience in each student. Students only worry about passing the school year and later, once out of school in practical life, they become ordinary office clerks or child-making machines. 10 or 15 years of study so as to come out transformed into talking machines. The subjects studied are forgotten little by little until at last, nothing remains in the memory. If students become conscious of the subjects they studied, if their studies were not only based on information, imitation, and memory, matters would be different. They would leave school having acquired conscious, unforgettable, and complete knowledge, which would not be subjected to their unfaithful memories. Fundamental education will help students by awakening their conscience and intelligence. Fundamental education takes young people along the path of true revolution. Students would insist that teachers give them true education, fundamental education. It is not enough for students to sit at school desks to receive information about a king or a war, but something else is needed. Fundamental education is needed to awaken conscience. It is imperative for students to leave school mature, truly conscious and intelligent, so that they do not become simple automatic parts of social machinery. Chapter 3. The authorities. The government has authority. The state has authority. The police, the law. Soldiers, parents, teachers, religious leaders, etc., have authority. There are two types of authority, subconscious and conscious. Unconscious and subconscious authorities are useless. We imperatively need authorities with conscience. Unconscious authorities have filled the world with tears and pain. Unconscious authorities abuse authority at home and at school, precisely because they are unconscious. Today, unconscious parents and teachers are only blind leaders of the blind, and as the sacred scriptures say, they will all end up headfirst in the abyss. Unconscious parents and teachers force us to do absurd things which they consider logical during infancy. They say it is for our own good. Parents are unconscious authorities, as it is demonstrated by their treatment of children as trash, as if parents were the superior species of mankind. Teachers end up hating certain students and pampering or spoiling others. They sometimes severely punish any hated student even if he and she is studious, and reward with magnificent grades students who are spoiled and do not really deserve it. Parents and teachers dictate aired norms to children and young people. Authorities who do not possess conscience can only do absurd things. We need authorities who have conscience. By this we mean that they should have integral knowledge of themselves, total knowledge of all their inner values. Only he who truly possesses complete knowledge of him is awake in an integral form and has conscience. Everyone believes they know themselves, but it is very difficult to find someone in life who truly knows himself. People have totally mistaken concepts about themselves. To know oneself requires great and awesome personal efforts. Only through the knowledge of oneself do we truly achieve conscience. The abuse of authority is due to unconsciousness. No authority with conscience would ever abuse authority. Some philosophers are against all authority. They detest authorities. Such a way of thinking is false because within everything created, from a microbe to a sun, there are levels and levels, degrees and degrees, superior forces that control and direct and inferior forces which are controlled and directed. In a simple beehive, the authority lies with the queen. In any ant's nest there exist authority and laws. The destruction of the authority principle would lead to anarchy. The authorities of these critical times are which we live, are unconscionable, and it is obvious that due to this psychological fact, they enslave, shackle, abuse, and cause pain. We need masters, instructors, or spiritual guides, government authorities, parents, etc., who have full conscience. Only in this manner can we truly create a better world. It is stupid to say that spiritual masters and spiritual guides are not needed. It is absurd to be unaware of the authority principle in all creation. Those who are self-sufficient and proud have the opinion that masters and spiritual guides are not necessary. We should recognize our own nothingness and misery. We should understand that we need authorities, masters, spiritual instructors, etc., but with conscience so that they can guide and help us wisely. The unconscious authority of teachers destroys the creative power of students. If a student paints, the unconscious teacher tells him what he should paint, which tree or scenery he should copy. Fearful students do not dare step outside the mechanical rules of teachers. That is not creating. It is necessary for a student to become creative, to be capable of stepping out of the unconscious norms of unconscious teachers, so that he or she is able to transmit all that he feels in relation to all the enchantment and deep meaning of life which circulates on a tree's trembling leaves. Teachers with conscience would not oppose free creativity of the heart. Teachers with conscious authority would never mutilate the minds of students. Unconscious teachers destroy the mind and intelligence of students. Teachers with unconscious authority only know how to punish and dictate stupid rules so that students may behave well. Teachers with conscience teach their students with extreme patience, helping them to understand their individual difficulties, so that by understanding they are able to transcend all their errors and advance successfully. Authority with conscience would never destroy intelligence. Unconscious authority destroys intelligence and causes serious damages to students. Intelligence only comes to us when we enjoy authentic freedom. Teachers with conscious authority truly know how to respect creative freedom. Unconscious teachers believe that they know it all and ruin students' freedom by castrating their intelligence with lifeless norms. Teachers with conscience know that they do not know and even give themselves the luxury of learning by observing the creative capacity of their students. It is necessary for school, college, and university students to go from the simple condition of disciplined machines to the brilliant position of intelligent free beings so that they are able to face all the problems of existence with success. This requires competent teachers with conscience, who really become interested in their students. Well-paid teachers so that they may never have monetary problems of any type. Unfortunately, every teacher, parent, and student believes to have conscience and to be awake, but that is their gravest error. In life, it is very rare to find an awakened person with conscience. People dream when their body sleeps and dream when their body is awake. People drive cars dreaming, they work dreaming, walk in the streets dreaming, live all the time dreaming. It is very natural for a professor to forget his umbrella, a book, or wallet in his car. All that happens because the professor has his conscience asleep, he dreams. It is very difficult for people to accept that they are asleep. The entire world believes that it is awake. If someone was to accept that his conscience is asleep, it is obvious that he would begin to awaken from that very moment. A student leaves his book or notebook at home, which he has to carry to school. Forgetfulness of this type seems very normal, but it indicates the state of sleep in which the human conscience is. The passengers of any urban transport service often miss the street where they should have got off. They were asleep, and when they awake, they realize they have missed their street and have to walk back a few blocks. A human being is rarely really awake in life, and when he does awake for a brief moment, as in cases of infinite terror, he momentarily sees himself in an integral form. These moments are unforgettable. It is very difficult for a person who returns home after having traveled through an entire city to remember in detail all his thoughts, incidents, people, things, ideas, etc. On trying to remember, the person will find huge gaps in his memory which correspond precisely to the most profound states of sleep. Some students of psychology have set out to live on alert from moment to moment, but suddenly fall asleep, perhaps on meeting a friend in the street, on entering a store to buy something, etc., and hours later, when they remember their decision to live on alert and awake from instant to instant, they realize they had fallen asleep when they entered such and such a place or met such and such a person. Conscience is something very difficult to achieve, but one can reach this state by learning to live on alert and vigilance from moment to moment. If we want to achieve conscience, we need to know ourselves in an integral form. Every one of us has the ego, the self, which we need to explore to know ourselves in order to achieve conscience. It is imperative to observe ourselves, analyze and understand each of our defects. It is necessary to study ourselves in the field of the mind, emotions, habits, instincts, and sex. The mind has many subconscious levels, regions, or departments that we should know through observation, analysis, in-depth meditation, and profound understanding. Any defect can disappear from the intellectual region and continue existing in other unconscious levels of the mind. The first thing needed is to awaken, in order to understand our own misery, nothingness, and pain. Afterwards, the ego begins to die from moment to moment. The death of the psychological ego is imperative. Only by dying, a truly conscious being is born within us. Only our being can exercise true conscious authority. Awakening, death, and birth are the three psychological phases that lead us to true conscious existence. We must be awakening in order to die and must die in order to be born. Whoever dies without having awakened becomes a stupid saint. Whoever is born without having died becomes an individual with a double personality, the very just and the very perverse. The exercise of true authority can only be exercised by those who possess conscious being. Those who do not yet possess conscious being and have got no conscience tend to abuse authority and cause great harm. Teachers should learn to rule and students should learn to obey. Those psychologists who pronounce themselves against obedience are in fact very mistaken, because no one can rule consciously if he has not first learned to obey. It is necessary to know how to rule consciously and to obey consciously. Chapter 4. Discipline. Teachers of schools, colleges, and universities give too much importance to discipline, and we should study this matter in detail in this chapter. All of us who have gone through school, college, or university know very well what discipline is: rules, ferals, scolding, etc. Discipline is that which is called the cultivation of resistance. School teachers delight in cultivating resistance. Resistance is taught to us to build something against some other thing. We are taught to resist the temptations that laziness brings, temptations of not studying, of not going to school, of playing, laughing, ridiculing teachers, violating rules, etc. Teachers have the mistaken concept that through discipline we can understand the need for respecting school rules, for studying, maintaining our composure before teachers, behaving well with our classmates, etc. There exists among people the mistaken concept that the more we resist, the more we reject, then the more we make ourselves understandable, free, complete, successful. People do not want to realize that the more we fight against something, the more we resist, the more we reject, the less is our comprehension. If we fight against the vice of drinking, this vice will disappear for a while, but since we have not understood it profoundly in all the levels of the mind, it will return later when we neglect our vigilance, and we will drink at once for a whole year. If we reject the vice of fornication, we will be chaste in appearance for a while, even though in other levels of the mind we will continue being frightening stirs as our erotic dreams and our wet dreams demonstrate. Then we will return with more strength to our old ways of unredeemable fornicators, due to the concrete fact of not having profoundly understood what fornications is. Many are those who reject greed, who fight against it, discipline themselves against it following strict norms of conduct. But since they have not truly understood the whole process of greed, it turns out they covet deep down the state of not being greedy. Many are those who discipline themselves against anger, who learn to resist it, but the former continues existing in other levels of the subconscious mind, even when it has apparently disappeared in our character, and at the slightest neglect of our guard, the subconscious betrays us, and then we thunder and flash filled with anger, when we least expect it and perhaps for some unimportant reason. Many are those who discipline themselves against jealousy and finally firmly believe that they have extinguished it, but since they did not understand it, clearly it appears once more in a scene precisely when we thought it was truly dead. Only in the full absence of disciplines, only in real freedom, will the burning flame of understanding emerge in the mind. Creative freedom can never exist in a framework. We need freedom to fully understand our psychological defects. We urgently need to demolish walls and break steel shackles to be free. We have to experience for ourselves everything that our school teachers and parents have told us as good and useful. It is not enough to memorize and imitate. We need to understand. All teachers' efforts should be directed to the conscience of students. They should exert themselves so that students enter the path of understanding. It is not enough to tell students that they should be this or that. It is necessary that students learn to be free so that they can examine, study, analyze for themselves all the values, all the things that people have told them are beneficial, useful, noble, and not just accept them and imitate them. People do not want to explore for themselves. They have closed, stupid minds that do not want to investigate. Mechanicals' minds that never investigate and only imitate. It is necessary, urgent, indispensable for students to enjoy true freedom, to discover themselves, to inquire, to understand from their earliest years until the moment they leave the classroom, and not to be limited by the abject walls of prohibitions, scolding, and disciplines. If students are told what they should and should not do, and they are not allowed to understand and experience, where then is their intelligence? What opportunity has been given to their intelligence? Then, what is the use of passing exams, dress up smartly, and have many friends if we are not intelligent? Intelligence only comes to us when we are truly free to investigate for ourselves, to understand, to analyze independently without the fear of scolding and without the ferule of disciplines. Scared, frightened students submitted to terrible disciplines can never know. They can never be intelligent. Today, the only thing that interests parents and teachers is that students have a career, that they become doctors, lawyers, engineers, office employees, living machines, and that they later marry and also transform themselves into child-making machines, and that is all. When boys or girls want to do something new, something different, when they feel the need to escape from this framework of prejudices, antiquated habits, disciplines, family or national traditions, etc., then the parents tighten the shackles of prison more and they tell the boy or girl, "Do not do that. We are not willing to support you in that. These things are madness," etc. Thus the boy or girl is formally imprisoned inside the prison of disciplines, traditions, antiquated customs, decrepit ideas, etc. Fundamental education teaches the conciliation of order with freedom. Order without freedom is tyranny. Freedom without order is anarchy. Freedom and order wisely combined constitute the basis of fundamental education. Students should enjoy perfect freedom to find out for themselves, to inquire, to discover what they really and truly are in themselves and what they can do in life. Students, soldiers, police, and in general all those people who have to live subjected to rigorous disciplines, usually become cruel and insensitive to human pain, merciless. Discipline destroys human sensitivity, and that has already been totally demonstrated by observation and experience. Due to so many disciplines and rules, people of this age have totally lost all sensitivity and have become cruel and merciless. In order to be truly free, one needs to be sensitive and humane. In schools, colleges, and universities, students are taught to pay attention in classes, and the students pay attention to avoid a scolding, a pulling of ears, a beating with the ruler, etc. But unfortunately, they are not taught to really understand what conscious attention is. Out of discipline, the student pays attention, and many times wastes creative energy in a useless way. The creative energy is the most subtle type of energy fabricated by the human machine. Eating, drinking, and all the processes of digestion are, deep down, transformation processes in which gross substances become useful substances and energies. The creative energy is the most subtle type of matter and energy made by the organism. If we know how to consciously pay attention, we can save creative energy. Unfortunately, teachers do not teach their students what conscious attention is. Wherever we direct our attention, we spend creative energy. We can save that energy if we divide attention, if we do not become identified with things, people, and ideas. When we identify ourselves with things, people, and ideas, we forget ourselves and lose creative energy in a most pitiful way. It is imperative to know that we need to save creative energy to awaken conscience, and that creative energy is living potential. It is the vehicle of the conscience, an instrument to awaken conscience. When we learn not to forget ourselves, when we learn to divide the attention between subject, object, and place, we save creative energy to awaken conscience. It is necessary to learn to use attention to awaken conscience. But students do not know anything about this because their teachers have not taught them. When we learn to use attention consciously, discipline becomes unnecessary. A student who pays attention in the class, to his lessons and to order, does not need discipline of any type. It is imperative that teachers understand the need for intelligently reconciling freedom and order, and this is possible through conscious attention. Conscious attention excludes that which is called identification. When we identify ourselves with things, people, and ideas, fascination takes over, producing the sleep of the conscience. We must know how to pay attention without identification. When we pay attention to something or someone and we forget ourselves, it results in fascination and the sleep of the conscience. Observe carefully a moviegoer. He is asleep, unaware of everything and of himself. He is empty within and looks like a zombie. He dreams with the movie and the hero high is watching. Students should pay attention in classrooms without forgetting themselves so that they do not fall into the terrible sleep of the conscience. A student should see himself in action when he is taking an exam or when he is at the blackboard as told by the teacher or when he is studying or resting or playing with his classmates. Attention divided in the parts, subject, object, place, is in fact conscious. Attention. When we do not commit the error of identifying ourselves with things, people and ideas, we save creative energy, and we accelerate within us the awakening of conscience. Whoever wants to awaken conscience in the superior worlds should begin by awakening in the here and now. When a student commits the error of identifying himself with things, people, and ideas, he commits the error of forgetting himself and falls asleep through. Fascination. Discipline does not teach students to pay attention. Discipline is a true prison for the mind. Students should learn to use conscious attention from the very desk at school so that later on, in the real world outside the school, they do not commit the error of forgetting themselves. A man who forgets himself in front of a person who insults him identifies himself with that person, becomes fascinated, falls into the deep sleep of the conscience, hurts or kills and inevitably goes to prison. He who does not become fascinated with a person who insults him and does not identify himself with that person, does not forget himself, he who knows how to pay conscious attention, would be incapable of giving any importance to the words of an insulter, or would be incapable of wounding or killing. All the errors that human beings commit in life are because they forget themselves, they identify, become fascinated and fall into sleep. It would be better for young people, for all students, to be taught how to awaken their conscience instead of being enslaved with so many absurd disciplines. Chapter 5. What to think, how to think. At home and at school, parents and teachers always tell us what we should think, but never in life do they teach us how to think. To know what to think is relatively easy. Our parents, teachers, tutors, authors, etc., each of them is a dictator in his own way. Each of them wants us to think about their dictations, demands, theories, prejudices, etc. Dictators of the mind are as common as weeds. Everywhere there is a perverse tendency to enslave, to bottle up other people's minds, to force them to live within determined norms, prejudices, etc. Thousands of millions of dictators of the mind have never wanted to respect the mental freedom of anyone. If someone does not think like them, he is classified as perverse, renegade, ignorant, and so on. Everybody wants to enslave everyone. Everybody wants to violate the intellectual freedom of other people. Nobody wants to respect other people's freedom of thought. Everyone feels sensible, wise, marvelous, and as it is natural, wants others to be like him, to make of him a hero, to think like him. The mind has been abused too much. Observe businessmen and their advertisements on newspapers, radio and television, etc. Commercial advertising is made in a dictatorial way. Buy such and such a soap. Such and such shoes. Buy it now. Immediately. Do not leave it for tomorrow. It has to be done immediately, etc. The only thing left for them to say is that if you do not obey, you will be put in jail or killed. A parent forcefully wants to push his own ideas into his child, and a school teacher reprimand, punishes and gives low grades if a boy or girl does not dictatorially accept the teacher's ideas. Half of humanity wants to enslave the mind of the other half of humanity. This tendency to enslave other people's minds stands out at first sight when we study the dark pages of Black history. Everywhere there have existed and still exist bloody dictators determined to enslave countries, bloody dictatorships that dictate what people should think. Unfortunate is he who tries to think freely. He inevitably goes to a concentration camp, Siberia, prison, hard labor, he is hung, shot, exiled, etc. Neither teachers, nor parents, nor books want to teach how to think. People enjoy forcing others to think in the way that they believe is right, and it is obvious that everyone is a dictator in his own way when it comes to this situation. Each of us thinks we have the last word, that everyone else should think in our way because we are the best. Parents, teachers, and bosses scold their subordinates over and over again. That horrible tendency of humanity to be disrespectful to others, to violate other people's mind, to cage, lock up, enslave, and chain other people's minds is frightening. A husband wants to force into his wife's head his doctrine, ideas, etc., and a woman wants to do the same. Many times, husband and wife divorce because of incompatibility of ideas. Marriage partners do not want to understand the need to respect each other's intellectual freedom. No partner has the right to enslave the other partner's mind. Each, of fact, deserves respect. Each has the right to think as they like, to practice their religion, to belong to whatever political party they want to. School children are forced to think about certain ideas, but are not taught how to use their minds. Children's minds are tender, flexible, and ductile, while those of elderly people are hard, fixed like concrete in a mold. They do not and cannot change. Children's and young people's minds are capable of many changes, and their minds can change. Children and young people can be taught how to think. It is difficult to teach elderly people how to think, because they are the way they are and die in this way. In life, it is very rare to find an old person interested in changing radically. People's minds are shaped from childhood. That is what parents and school teachers prefer to do. They enjoy shaping the mind of children and young people. A mind in a gold is in fact a conditioned mind, an enslaved mind. It is necessary that school teachers break the fetters of the mind. It is imperative that teachers know how to guide the minds of children towards true freedom so that they are not enslaved anymore. It is indispensable that teachers teach their students how to think. Teachers should understand the need to teach students the path of analysis. Meditation, understanding. No understandable person should ever accept anything in a dogmatic way. It is urgent to first investigate, understand, and inquire before accepting. In other words, we shall say that there is no need to accept, but instead, we should investigate, analyze, meditate, and understand. When understanding is complete, acceptance is unnecessary. It is useless to fill our heads with intellectual information if on leaving school we do not know how to think and continue like living machines, repeating the same routine of our parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents. To always repeat the same thing, to live the life of machines, from home to work, and from work to home, to marry and become little child-making machines, is not living. If that is what we study for, if that is why we go to school, college, and university for 12 of 15 years, we would be better off by not studying. Mahatma Gandhi was a very unique man. Many times, Protestant pastors sat on his doorstep for whole hours trying to convert him to Protestant Christianity. Gandhi did not accept the teaching of pastors, neither did he reject them. He understood and respected them, and that was all. Many times Mahatma said, "I am Brahmin, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, etc." Mahatma understood that all religions are necessary because they contain the same eternal values. Accepting or rejecting any doctrine or concept reveals a lack of mental maturity. When we reject or accept something, it is because we have not understood it. Whenever understanding exists, accepting or rejecting is unnecessary. The mind that believes, the mind that does not believe, and the mind that doubts is an ignorant mind. The path of wisdom does not lie in believing, not believing or doubting. The path of wisdom consists in inquiring, analyzing, meditating, experimenting. Truth is the unknown from moment to moment. Truth has nothing to do with what one believes or stops believing, neither does it have anything to do with skepticism. Truth is not a matter of accepting or rejecting, it is something to experience, live, and understand. All the efforts on the part of teachers should, in the ultimate synthesis, take students into experiencing what is real, what is true. It is urgent that school teachers abandon old-fashioned and damaging tendencies which are always directed at shaping the pliable and ductile minds of children. It is absurd for adults, filled with prejudices, passions, old-fashioned preconceptions, etc., to damage children's and young people's minds in trying to shape their mind according to their rotten, dumb, old-fashioned ideas. It is better to respect the intellectual freedom of their students, respect their mental quickness, their creative spontaneity. Teachers do not have the right to confine the minds of students to a cage. What is essential is not to dictate to the minds of students what to think, but rather, to teach fully how to think. The mind is the instrument of knowledge, and it is necessary for teachers to teach their students how to use that instrument wisely. Chapter 6. The Search for Security. When chicks are afraid, they hide under the loving wings of a hen in search for security. A frightened child runs to find his mother because beside her he feels secure. This demonstrates that fear and the search for security are found intimately associated. A man that fears being assaulted by assailants finds security in a gun. A country that fears being attacked by another country buys cannons, planes, warships. It will arm armies and prepare for war. Many people who do not know how to work are terrified when faced with misery. They search for security in crime by becoming thieves or assailants. Many women who lack intelligence are frightened when faced with the possibility of misery and become prostitutes. A jealous man who fears losing his wife searches for security in his gun. He kills and afterwards ends in jail. A jealous woman kills her rival or her husband and, in this way, becomes a murderer. She fears losing her husband and wanting to secure him, she kills another woman or resolves to kill him. A landlord fearful that people will not pay him the rent demands contracts, bonds, deposits, etc., wanting to insure himself. If all the landlords of a city do the same, a poor widow with children who cannot fulfill those heavy requirements will have to sleep on the street or in the city's parks with her children. All wars have their origin in fear. The Gestapo, torture, concentration camps, Siberia's horrible prisons, exiles, forced labor, firing squads, etc., have their origin in fear. Nations attack other nations because of fear. They search for security in violence, thinking that by killing, invading, etc., they can make themselves secure, strong, and powerful. Secret police offices of counter-espionage, both East and West, spies are tortured, because the government fears for the state security. All crimes, wars, and transgressions have their origin in fear and in the search for security. In bygone days, there was sincerity among people. Today, fear and the search for security have done away with the wonderful fragrance of sincerity. Friends distrust friends. They fear that their friend will rob them, swindle, or exploit them, and they even use, in a stupid and perverse way, proverbs such as this one: never turn your back on your best friend. Hitler-like people used to say that this proverb was golden. Now a friend fears a friend and even uses proverbs to protect himself. There is no longer sincerity among friends. Fear and the search for security have done away with the delightful fragrance of sincerity. Castro Ruz in Cuba has sent millions of citizens to the firing squad, fearful that these citizens would be the end of him. Castro seeks security in firing squads. He thinks that in this way he can find security. The perverse and bloodthirsty Stalin plagued Russia with his bloody purges. That was his way of finding security. Hitler organized the Gestapo, the frightening Gestapo, for the security of the state. There is no doubt that he feared that he would be overthrown, and because of this he founded the bloody Gestapo. Every bitterness of this world has its origins in the search for security and fear. School teachers should teach their students the virtue of courage. It is unfortunate that children are filled with fear in their own home. Children are threatened, intimidated, terrorized, and beaten. It is the custom of parents and teachers to terrorize children and teenagers with the purpose of forcing them to study. It is common to tell children and teenagers that if they do not study, they will have to beg for money and they will wander the streets starving or will work in humble jobs such as shoe shining, carrying bales, selling newspapers, etc., as if work was a crime. Deep down, behind all the words of parents and teachers, there exists fear for children and the search for security for children. The serious thing about all of this is that the child or teenager develops complexes, he becomes fearful and later on in life, becomes a person filled with fear. Parents and teachers who have the bad taste of frightening children and teenagers in an unconscious way take them down a path of crime. As we have already said, every crime has its origins in fear and the search for security. Nowadays, fear and the search for security have turned the planet Earth into a horrible hell. The whole world fears and wants security. In bygone days, one could travel freely, but now borders are filled with armed guards. Passports and certificates of every type are demanded to be able to go from one country into another. All of this is the result of fear and the search for security. He who arrives is feared, and security is found in passports and papers of all types. School teachers, college and university lecturers should understand the horror of all this and cooperate for the good of the world by knowing how to educate the new generations and teaching them the path of real values. It is imperative to teach new generations not to fear and not to search for securities in anything or anyone. It is indispensable that every individual learns to be more confident in himself. Fear and the search for security are terrible weaknesses that transform life into a terrifying hell. Everywhere abound fearful cowards and weak people who are always in search for security. Life is feared, death is feared, other people's opinions, gossip is feared, the loss of a social or political position's feared, the loss of prestige, money, a lovely house, a beautiful woman, a good husband, a job, a business, a monopoly, the furniture, the car, etc., is feared. Everything is feared. Cowards, fearful people, weak people abound everywhere. However, nobody thinks himself a coward. Everyone boasts of being strong, of being courageous, etc. In all social classes there exist thousands of millions of interests that one fears to lose, and because of this everyone looks for securities that become more and more complex, making life more difficult, complicated, bitter, cruel, and merciless. All gossip, slander, intrigues, etc., have their origins in fear and in the search for security. To avoid losing our wealth, position, power, and prestige, slander and gossip are propagated, murder is committed, and people secretly pay for murders to be committed. Powerful people on earth even have the luxury of having salaried and well-paid murderers with a loathsome purpose of eliminating anyone who threatens to eclipse them. They love power for the sake of power and assure themselves of it on the basis of money and much blood. Newspapers are constantly reporting news of many suicide cases. Many believe that anyone who commits suicide is brave, but really anyone who commits suicide is a coward who fears life and looks for security in the fleshless arms for death. Some war heroes were known as weak and cowardly people when they saw themselves face to face with death. Their terror was so frightening that they became terribly wild, searching for security for their life, and in making a supreme effort against death they were then declared heroes. Fear is often confused with courage. He who commits suicide seems to be very brave. He who carries a gun appears to be very brave, but in reality, people who commit suicide and carry guns are very coward. He who does not fear life will not commit suicide. He who does not fear anyone will not carry a gun on his waist. It is imperative that school teachers teach citizens in a clear and precise way what true courage is and what fear is. Fear and the search for security have turned the world into a dreadful hell. Chapter 7. Ambition. Ambition has several causes, and one of them is fear. A humble boy who in the parks of capital cities cleans the shoes of proud gentlemen could become a thief if he begins to fear poverty, fear himself or his future. A humble machinist who works in an expensive store could become a thief or a prostitute overnight if she began to fear the future, life, old age, or herself. An elegant waiter of a luxurious restaurant or a grand hotel could become a gangster, a bank robber, or a very high-class thief if by misfortune he begins to fear himself, his humble position as a waiter, or his own future. An insignificant insect covets being elegant. A poor shop assistant who serves clients and who with patience shows us a tie, a shirt, shoes, making many bows with a plastic smile, covets something more because he is afraid. He fears misery, a somber future, old age, etc. Ambition is multifaceted. Ambition has the face of a saint and a devil, the face of a man and a woman, the face of concern and of indifference, of virtue and of a sinner. There exists ambition in he who wants to get married and in that hardened old bachelor who detests marriage. There exists ambition in he who desires with infinite madness to be someone, to take part, to climb, and there exists ambition in he who becomes a hermit, in he who does not want anything of this world, because his only ambition is to reach heaven, to liberate himself, etc. There exists worldly ambition and spiritual ambition. Sometimes ambition uses the mask of indifference or sacrifice. Whoever does not covet this miserable wretched world, covets the other, and he who does not covet money, covets psychic powers. The ego, the ID, the myself, delights in hiding ambition, putting it in the most secret nook of the mind, and then says, I do not covet anything, I love my fellow men, I work unselfishly for the good of all human beings. The political old fox and he who knows it all sometimes astonishes the masses with his apparent unselfish deeds, but when he abandons his job, it is hardly normal for him not to leave his country carrying out a few million pounds or dollars. Ambition disguised with the mask of unselfishness often fools the most astute people. There exist in the world many people who only covet, not being covetous. There are many people who renounce all pomp and vanity of this world because they only covet their own intimate self-perfection. The penitent that walks on his knees up to the temple and who, filled with faith, lashes himself, apparently does not covet anything and even gives himself the luxury of giving without asking anything back from anyone. However, it is clear that he covets a miracle, a cure, health for himself or for some relative, or indeed, covets eternal salvation. We admire truly religious men and women, but we lament that they do not love their religion with true unselfishness. The holy religions, the sublime sects, orders, spiritual societies, etc., deserve our unselfish love. It is very rare to find in this world someone who loves his religion, school, sect, etc., unselfishly. This is unfortunate. The whole world is filled with ambitions. Hitler hurled himself into war because of ambition. All wars have their origins in fear and ambition, and the most serious problems of life have their origins in ambition. The whole world lives fighting the whole world due to ambition. Some against others and everyone against everyone else. Every person in life covets being someone, and people of a certain age, teachers, parents, tutors, etc., motivate children and teenagers to continue down the horrendous path of ambition. Elders tell students, you have to be someone in life, become rich, get married to a millionaire, be powerful, etc. The old, horrible, ugly, old-fashioned generation wants new generations also to be ambitious, ugly, and horrible like them. The gravity of this is that new generations let themselves be talked into and led down the horrible path of ambition. School teachers should teach students that no honest job deserves contempt. It is absurd to look disdainfully at a driver, a shop assistant, a peasant, a shoeshine, etc. Every humble job is beautiful and necessary in social life. Not all of us were born to be engineers, governors, presidents, doctors, lawyers, etc. In society, all jobs and trades are needed. No honest job can ever be disdainful. In everyday life, each human being serves a purpose, and the important thing is to know what purpose one serves. It is the duty of teachers to discover the vocation of each student and guide him or her in that direction. He who works in life in accordance with his vocation will work with true love and without ambition. Love should replace ambition. Vocation is that which we really like, that profession which we happily fulfill because it is what pleases us and what we love to do. Unfortunately, in modern life, people work unwillingly because of ambition, since they perform jobs that do not coincide with their vocation. When someone works at something that he likes, with true vocation, he does it with love because he loves his vocation and because his abilities in life are precisely those of his vocation. It is precisely the task of teachers to know how to guide students to discover their abilities and to orientate them along the path of a real vocation. Chapter 8. Love. Starting from school desks, students should understand fully that which is called love. Fear and dependency are often confused with love, however they are not. Students depend on their parents and teachers, and it is clear that they respect and fear them at the same time. Children and teenagers depend on their parents for clothing, food, money, shelter, etc., and clearly, they always feel protected. They know they depend on their parents and for this reason respect and even fear them, but this is not love. As proof of what we are saying, we can verify exactly that any child or teenager trusts more his school friends than his own parents. Really and truly, these children and teenagers talk with their school friends about intimate things that they would never discuss with their own parents. This is showing us that there is no real trust between children and their parents, that there is no true love. It is urgent to understand that there is a radical difference between love and that which is fear, respect, dependency. It is urgent to give due respect to our parents and teachers, but not to confuse this respect with love. Respect and love should be intimately joined, but we should not confuse one with the other. Parents fear for their children and want the best for them, a good job, a wonderful marriage, security, etc., and confuse this fear with true love. It is necessary to understand that without true love it is impossible for parents and teachers to guide new generations wisely, even though they might have good intentions. The path that leads to the abyss is paved with good intentions. Let us look at the case known worldwide as rebel without a cause. This is a mental epidemic that has spread throughout the world. Hundreds of rich kids, said to be spoiled, cherished, and loved by their parents who attack defenseless pedestrians, beat and rape women, steal, stone, hang around in gangs causing damage to everything. They are disrespectful to teachers, parents, etc. The rebels without a cause are the result of lack of true love. Where there exists true love, there cannot exist rebels without a cause. If parents really loved their children, they would know how to guide them intelligently, and there would be no rebels without a cause. Rebels without a cause are the result of bad guidance. Parents have not felt enough love for them to really dedicate themselves to guiding their children wisely. Modern parents only think of money and of giving their children more and more, the latest car, the latest fashion in clothes, etc., but they do not really love. Parents do not truly love. They do not know how to love, and the result is the rebels without a cause. The superficiality of this era is due to a lack of true love. Modern life is like a shallow pond, no depth to it. In the profound lake of life, many creatures can exist, a lot of fish, but a puddle by the side of the road is soon dried up by the rays of the sun, and then the only thing left behind is mud, poverty, and ugliness. It is impossible to understand the beauty of life in all its glory if we have not learnt to love. People confuse respect and fear with love. We respect our superiors, fear them, and then we think we love them. Children fear their parents and teachers, respect them, and then think they love them. The child fears the whiplash, authority, bad grades, scolding at home or in school, etc., and then thinks he really loves his parents and teachers, but actually he fears them. We depend on the job, on the boss. We fear the misery of staying unemployed, and then we believe that we love the boss, and we even watch out for his interests, take care of his interests, but that is not love. That is fear. Many people are afraid of thinking for themselves about the mysteries of life and death. They are afraid to inquire, investigate, understand, study, etc., and then they exclaim, "I love God," and that is enough. They believe that they love God, but in reality, they do not love, they fear. During a war, a wife feels that she adores her husband more than ever and hopes with infinite anxiety that he returns home, but in reality, she does not love him. She is simply afraid to be left without a husband, without protection, etc. Psychological slavery, depending on someone, is not love. It is merely fear, and that is all. A child at school depends on his teacher, and it is obvious that he fears expulsion, low grades, reprimands, and many times believes that he loves the teacher, but what happens is that he fears him. When a wife is pregnant or in danger of death because of whatever illness, her husband believes that he loves her much more, but what is really happening is that he fears losing her. He depends on her for many things, such as food, sex, laundry, caresses, etc., and is afraid of losing her. That is not love. Everyone says that he adores everybody, but that is not the case. It is very rare to find someone in life who knows how to truly love. If parents truly loved their children, if children truly loved their parents and teachers truly loved their students, no wars could exist. Wars would be 100% impossible. What happens is that people do not understand what love is, and every fear, every psychological slavery, every passion, etc., is confused with love. People do not know how to love. If they did, life would be a paradise. Lovers believe that they love, and many would swear with blood that they love. However, they are only impassioned. Once that passion is satisfied, the sandcastle falls to the ground. Passion tends to fool the mind and the heart. Everyone with passion believes that he is in love. It is very rare in life to find a couple truly in love. Impassioned couples abound, but it is very difficult to find a couple in love. All artists sing of love, but they do not know what love is and confuse passion with love. If there is something very difficult in life, it is to avoid confusing passion with love. Passion is sexual, 100% passion is beastly, but sometimes it is also very refined and subtle. It is always confused with love. Teachers should teach students and teenagers how to distinguish between love and passion. Only in this way will many tragedies in life be prevented later on. Teachers are obliged to encourage responsibility in students. Therefore, they should properly prepare them so that they do not fall themselves into tragedies of life. It is necessary to understand what love is, for it cannot be mixed with jealousies, passions, violence, fear, attachments, psychological dependence, etc. Love, unfortunately, does not exist in human beings, and it is not something that can be acquired, bought, or cultivated like greenhouse plant. Love should be born in us. It is only born when we have thoroughly understood the hatred, fear, sexual passions, psychological slavery, and dependence we carry within. We should understand what these psychological defects are, and how they are processed within us, not only on the intellectual level of life, but also in other hidden and unknown levels of the subconscious. It is necessary to take out all those defects from the many windings of the mind. Only in this way is love born within us in a spontaneous and pure form. It is impossible to try to transform the world without the flame of love. Only love can truly transform the world. Chapter 9. The Mind. By experience, we have been able to prove that it is impossible to understand what love is until we have completely understood the complicated problem of the mind. Whoever supposes that the mind is the brain is completely mistaken. The mind is energetic, subtle, and can become independent of matter. It transports itself to very remote places to see and hear what is happening in those places under certain hypnotic states or during normal sleep. In laboratories of parapsychology, noteworthy experiments are made on individuals in a hypnotic state. Many people in a hypnotic state have been able to give minute detail about events, people, and situations that have been taking place during their hypnotic trance in very remote distances. After these experiments, scientists have been able to verify the reality of the information concerning the facts and accuracy of events. With these experiments in laboratories of parapsychology, it has been totally demonstrated through observation and experience that the brain is not the mind. Indeed, we can truly say that the mind can travel through time and space, independently of the brain, to see and hear things that happen in remote places. The reality of extrasensory perception has already been completely proved, and only a crazy person or an idiot could think of denying the reality of extrasensory perception. The brain is made to elaborate thought, but it is not thought. The brain is merely an instrument of the mind, however, it is not the mind. We need to study the mind in depth if we truly want to know fully that which is called love. The mind of children and young people are more elastic, ductile, quick, alert, etc. There are many children and young people who enjoy asking their parents and teachers about this, that, and the other. They want to know something more. That is why they ask, observe, see certain details that adults do not appreciate or do not perceive. As the years go by and we become older, the mind sets itself little by little. The minds of old people are set, fixed, and would not change for anything in the world. Old people's minds are already fixed, and like this they die, they do not change. Everything is elaborated from a fixed point of view. The nonsense of old people, their prejudices, set ideas, etc., all appear like a rock, a stone that does not change in any way. That is why people commonly say, "That's the way I am, always have been, and always will be." It is urgent for teachers who are in charge of forming the personality of students to study the mind in depth so that they are able to intelligently orientate new generations. It is painful to understand how the mind becomes fixed little by little as time goes by. The mind is the killer of what is real and true. The mind destroys love. Whoever arrives at old age is no longer capable of loving because his mind is full of painful experiences, prejudices, set ideas like hard rocks. There are dirty old men who believe they are still capable of loving, but what is actually happening is that they are full of senile sexual passions and confuse passion with love. Every dirty old man or woman passes through tremendous lustful, passionate states before dying, and they believe that this is love. It is impossible for old people to love because the mind destroys it with its nonsense, set ideas, prejudices, jealousy, experiences, memories, sexual passions, etc. The mind is love's worst enemy. In super-civilized countries, love no longer exists because people's minds only smell of factories, bank accounts, retail products, etc. There are many traps for the mind, and the mind of every person is well bottled up. Some have bottled their minds in abominable communism, others have bottled it in heartless capitalism. There are some who have bottled their mind in jealousy, hate, desire to be rich and have a good social position, attachments to certain people, or attachment to their own suffering and family problems, etc. People love bottling up the mind. Few are those who decide to truly smash the bottle to pieces. We need to free the mind, but people love slavery, and it is very rare to find someone in life who does not have the mind totally bottled up. Teachers should teach their students all these things. They should teach new generations to observe their own mind, to investigate and understand it. Only through profound understanding can we prevent the mind from crystallizing, freezing, and becoming bottled up. The only thing that can transform the world is love, but the mind destroys love. We need to study our own mind, observe, investigate it profoundly, truly. Understand it. Only in this way, in becoming masters of ourselves, of our own mind, will we kill the killer of love and truly be happy. Those who live beautifully fantasizing about love, who live making projects about love, who want love to work in accordance to their likes and dislikes, projects and fantasies, norms and prejudices, memories and experiences, etc., will never be able to really know what love is. They have, in fact, become enemies of love. It is necessary to understand fully what the processes of the mind are in the state of accumulation of experiences. Many times, a teacher justly reprimands, but sometimes she does so stupidly and without any true reason, without understanding that every unjust reprimand remains in the minds of students. The result of such a mistaken procedure is usually the loss of love for the teacher. The mind destroys love, and that is something that school, college, and university teachers should never forget. It is necessary to deeply understand all those mental processes that put an end to the beauty of love. It is not enough to be a parent, it is necessary to know how to love. Parents believe that they love their children because they have them, because the children belong to them, such as when someone owns a bicycle, a car, or a house. That sense of possession and dependence is usually confused with love, but can never be love. Teachers of our second home, which is school, believe they love their students because they are in charge of them, but that is not love. The sense of possession or dependence is not love. The mind destroys love, and only by comprehending all the mistaken functionalisms of our mind, our absurd way of thinking, our bad customs, mechanical habits, etc., can we come to live and truly experience that which does not belong to time, and which is called love. Whoever wants love to transform itself into a piece of their mechanical routine, whoever wants love to walk upon the mistaken track of their own prejudices, cravings, fears, experiences of life, selfish way of looking at things, mistaken way of thinking, etc., do in fact put an end to love, because the latter never allows itself to be subdued. Whoever wants love to work as I like, I desire, I think, lose love, because Cupid, the god of love, is never ready to let himself be enslaved by the ego. We have to annihilate the ego, the myself, the ID, so we do not lose the child of love. The ego is a bunch of memories, cravings, fears, hatreds, passions, experiences, selfishness, envies, lust, etc. Only by understanding each defect separately, by studying and directly observing it, not only in the intellectual region but also in all the subconscious levels of the mind, will each defect disappear as we die from moment to moment. Only in this way will we achieve the disintegration of the ego. Whoever wants to bottle love up within the horrible traps of the ego, loses it and stays without it, because love can never be bottled up. Unfortunately, people want love to behave according to their habits, desires, customs, etc. People want to submit love to the ego, and that is absolutely impossible, since love does not obey the ego. Couples in love, or better said, couples with passion for each other, suppose that love should keep faithfully within the limits of their own desires, concupiscences, errors, etc., and in this way, they are totally wrong. Let's talk about us, say couples in love or sexually passionate for each other, who are plentiful in this world. Then we hear conversations, projects, desires, and goals. Each has something to say. He or she puts forward projects, desires, his or her way of looking at things of this life, and each wants love to move like a train on steel tracks forged by the mind. How wrong, how lost are these couples in love or with passions? How far away from reality they are. Love does not obey the ego, and when partners want to chain it down by the neck and submit it, it escapes, leaving the couple in disgrace. The mind has a bad habit of comparing. A man compares one girlfriend to another. A woman compares one man to another. A teacher compares one student to another student, as if all of them do not deserve the same appreciation. Truly, all types of comparison are abominable. Whoever contemplates a beautiful sunset and compares it to another does not really know how to understand the beauty he has before his very eyes. Whoever contemplates a beautiful sunset and compares it to another does not really appreciating the beauty he has before his eyes. Where there is comparison, there is no true love. A father and a mother who really love their children will never compare them to anyone. They will simply love them, and that is all. A husband who loves his wife never makes the mistake of comparing her to anyone else. He loves her, and that is all. The teachers who really love their students will never discriminate and never compare one with another. They truly love them, and that is all. A mind divided by comparisons and enslaved by dualities destroys love. A mind divided by the struggle of opposites is not capable of understanding the new. It becomes petrified and frozen. The mind has many depths, regions, subconscious areas, labyrinths, but the worthiest is the essence, the conscience, which is in the center. When duality ceases to exist, when the mind becomes integrated, serene, quiet, profound, when it no longer compares, then the essence, the conscience, awakens, and this should be the true objective of fundamental education. Let us distinguish between objectivity and subjectivity. In objectivity there is awakened conscience. In subjectivity there is sleep conscience, subconsciousness. Only objective conscience can enjoy objective knowledge. The intellectual knowledge that is actually received by students attending schools, colleges, and universities is 100% subjective. Objective knowledge cannot be acquired without an objective conscience. Students should first achieve self-consciousness and then objective conscience. Only through the path of love can we achieve objective conscience and objective knowledge. It is necessary to understand the complex problem of the mind if we truly want to tread the path of love. Chapter 10. Knowing how to listen. In the world there are many orators who astonish with their eloquence. However, few are those who know how to listen. To know how to listen is very difficult. When a teacher or lecturer speaks, The audience seems to be very attentive, as if following in detail each word of the speaker. Everything indicates that they are listening, that they are in a state of alertness, but in the psychological depth of each individual there is a secretary that translates each word of the speaker. This secretary is the ego, the myself, the ID. The job of this secretary consists in misinterpreting, in mistranslating the words of the speaker. The ego translates in accordance with its prejudices, preconceptions, fears, pride, anxieties, ideas, memories, etc. Students and people who together constitute the listening audience are not really listening to the speaker. They are listening to themselves, their own ego, their beloved Machiavellian ego that is not willing to accept what is real, the truth and the essential. Only in a state of alert novelty, with a spontaneous mind, free from the burden of the past, in a state of full receptivity, can we listen without the intervention of that wretched illumined secretary, the ego? When the mind is conditioned by memory, it only repeats what it has accumulated. A mind conditioned by experiences of so many yesterdays can only see the present through the cloudy lens of the past. If we want to know how to listen, if we want to learn how to listen, to discover the new, we should live in accordance with the philosophy of the present moment. It is urgent to live from moment to moment, without the preoccupations of the past and without the projects of the future. The truth is the unknown from moment to moment. Our minds should always be alert, in complete attention, free from prejudices, preconceptions, so as to really be receptive. School teachers should teach their students the profound significance contained in knowing how to listen. It is necessary to learn to live wisely, refining our senses, refining our behavior, our thoughts, and our feelings. If we do not know how to listen, and we are not capable of discovering the new from moment to moment, it is useless to have a great academic background. We need to refine attentions, to refine our manners, refine our people, our things, etc. It is impossible to be truly refined when we do not know how to listen. Crude, rough, deteriorated, degenerated minds never know how to listen, never know how to discover the new. Those minds only understand in a mistaken way the absurd translations of that satanic secretary called the ego. To be refined is something very difficult, and it requires complete attention. Someone can be a very refined person, in fashion, in suits, dresses, gardens, cars, and friendships. However, he will continue being rough, crude, and unpleasant within. Whoever knows how to really live from moment to moment treads the path of true refinement. He who has a receptive, spontaneous, integral, alert mind walks on the path of authentic refinement. Whoever opens himself to everything new, abandoning the burden of the past, preconceptions, prejudices, jealousies, fanaticisms, etc., walks victoriously along the path of authentic refinement. The degenerated mind lives imprisoned in the past, in preconceptions, pride, self-esteem, prejudices, etc. The degenerated mind does not know how to see new things, does not know how to listen. It is conditioned by self-esteem. The fanatics of Marxism-Leninism do not accept new things, do not admit the fourth characteristic of all things, the fourth dimension, because of pride. They love themselves too much. They become attached to their own absurd materialistic theories, and when we place them in the field of actual facts, and when we demonstrate the absurdity of their sophisms, they raise their left arm, look at their wristwatch, and give an evasive excuse to leave. Those are degenerate minds, decrepit minds that do not know how to listen nor how to discover the new, that do not accept reality because they are imprisoned in self-esteem. Minds that love themselves too much, minds that do not know about cultural refinements, crude, coarse minds, rough minds that only listen to their beloved ego. Fundamental education teaches how to listen, teaches how to live wisely. Teachers of schools, colleges, and universities should teach their students the real path of true vital refinement. It is of no use to spend 10 or 15 years in schools, colleges, and universities if on coming out, we are internally true pigs in our thoughts, ideas, feelings, and habits. Fundamental education is needed urgently because the new generations represent the beginning of a new era. The hour of true revolution has arrived. The moment of fundamental revolution has arrived. The past is the past and has already given fruits. We need to comprehend the deep meaning of the moment in which we live. Chapter 11. Wisdom and Love. Wisdom and love are the two main pillars of every true civilization. On one pan of the scales of cosmic justice, we should place wisdom, on the other we should place love. Wisdom and love should balance each other mutually. Wisdom without love is a destructive element. Love without wisdom can lead us into error. Love is law, but conscious love. It is necessary to study much and acquire knowledge, but it is also urgent to develop the spiritual being within us. Knowledge without the spiritual being well developed within us in a harmonious way becomes the cause of that which is called knavery. The being well developed within us, but without intellectual knowledge of any kind, gives rise to stupid saints. A stupid saint possesses very developed spiritual being, but since he does not have intellectual knowledge, he cannot do anything because he does not know how to. A stupid saint has the power of doing, but he cannot do because he does not know how to. Intellectual knowledge without the spiritual being well developed produces intellectual confusion, perversity, pride, etc. During the Second World War, thousands of scientists, devoid of any spiritual elements in the name of science and humanity, committed terrible crimes with the purpose of carrying out scientific experiments. We need to form a powerful intellectual culture, however, very well balanced with true conscious spirituality. We need revolutionary ethics and a revolutionary psychology if we really want to dissolve the ego in order to develop the true spiritual being within us. Unfortunately, for lack of love, people use the intellect in a destructive way. Students need to study science, history, mathematics, etc. It is necessary to acquire vocational skills with the purpose of being useful to our fellow beings. It is necessary to study. It is indispensable to accumulate basic knowledge. However, fear is not indispensable. Many people accumulate skills because of fear. They are afraid of life, death, hunger, misery, to what people will say, and for this reason they study. One should study because of love towards our fellow men with the desire of serving them better, but one should never study because of fear. In practical life, we have been able to prove that all those students that study because of fear, sooner or later become rascals. We need to be sincere with ourselves in order to observe and discover in ourselves all the processes of fear. In life, we should never forget that fear has many phases. Sometimes fear is confused with courage. Soldiers on the battlefield seems to be very brave, but in reality, they move and fight due to fear. A person who commits suicide seems at first sight to be very brave, but in reality, he is a coward who is afraid on life. All rascals in life appear to be very brave, but deep down they are cowards. Rascals often use their profession and power in a destructive way when they are afraid. For example, Castro was in Cuba. We never pronounce ourselves against the experience of practical life or against the cultivation of intellect, but we condemn the lack of love. Knowledge and experience of life become destructive when there is lack of love. The ego usually traps intellectual knowledge and experience when that which is called love is absent. Husbands and wives should always feel as if they were recently married, forgetting the past and happily living the present. Love and resentments are incompatible atomic substances. In true love, no resentments of any kind can exist. Love is eternal forgiveness. Love exists in those who feel true anguish for the suffering of their friends and enemies. True love exists in him who wholeheartedly works for the well-being of the humble, poor and needy. Love exists in him who, in a natural and spontaneous way, feels sympathy for the peasant who waters the furrow with the sweat of his brow, for the villager who suffers, for the beggar who asks for a coin, and for the humble dog in anguish and sickness which dies of hunger on the roadside. When we help someone wholeheartedly, when in a natural and spontaneous way, we care for a tree and water the flowers in the garden without anyone demanding it from us, then authentic generosity, true sympathy, and love exist. Unfortunately, people are not truly generous to the world. People are only concerned with their own selfish gains, desires, knowledge. experiences, sufferings, pleasures, etc. Many people exist in the world who possess only false generosity. False generosity exists in the astute politician, in the electoral fox who spends money with the goal of obtaining power, prestige, position, wealth, etc. We should not confuse false generosity with true generosity. True generosity is absolutely disinterested but can easily be confused with the selfish and false generosity of political foxes, capitalist crooks, and satyrs who desire women, etc. Generosity should come from our hearts. True generosity is not of the mind. Authentic generosity is the perfume of the heart. If people were generous, they would forget resentments accumulated in their memories, all the painful experiences of the many yesterdays, and would learn to live from moment to moment, always happy, always generous, full of true sincerity. Unfortunately, the ego is memory and lives in the past. It always wants to return to the past. The past overcomes people, destroys happiness, kills love. A mind bottled up in the past can never fully understand the profound significance of the present moment in which we live. Many people write to us seeking consolation, asking for a precious ointment to heal their painful heart, but few are those who worry about comforting the afflicted. The ego abuses experiences and the intellect by using them to grow stronger. On disintegrating the ego, experiences and the intellect remain in the hands of the intimate being, and all abuse then becomes impossible. Every student should guide himself on the vocational path and study in depth all theories related to his vocation. Studies and the intellect do not harm anyone, but we should not abuse the intellect. We need to study to avoid abusing the mind. He who wants to study theories of different vocations, who wants to harm others with the intellect, who practices violence on another's mind, etc., abuses the mind. It is necessary to study professional and spiritual subjects in order to have a balanced mind. It is urgent to arrive at an intellectual and spiritual synthesis if we really want a balanced mind. Teachers of schools, colleges, and universities should study our revolutionary psychology in depth if they really want to lead their students along the path of fundamental revolution. It is necessary that students acquire spiritual being and develop the true being in themselves so that they leave school transformed into responsible individuals, and not stupid rascals. Wisdom without love is useless. Intellect without love only produces rascals. Wisdom in itself is an atomic substance, atomic capital that should only be administered by individuals filled with true love. Chapter 12. Generosity. It is necessary to love and be loved, but unfortunately for the world, people do not love, neither are they loved. Real love is something unknown to people who confuse it very easily with passion and fear. If people were capable of loving and being loved, wars should be impossible on the face of the earth. Many marriages could be truly happy, but unfortunately, they are not, due to old resentments accumulated in their memories. If married couples were generous, they would forget the painful past and would live fully, filled with true happiness. The mind kills and destroys love. Experiences, disagreement, jealousy, etc., when accumulated in our memory, destroy love. Many resentful wives could be happy if they were generous enough to forget the past and live in the present, adoring their husbands. Many husbands could be truly happy with their wives if they were generous enough to forgive old errors and forget quarrels and unhappy situations accumulated in their memories. It is necessary and urgent that married couples understand the profound meaning of the present moment. Many people write to us about the miserable state they live in, but very few are those who break their only loaf of bread, which will satisfy their own hunger, to share it with others in need. People do not want to understand that a cause exists behind any effect, and that only by changing the cause do we modify the effect. The ego, our beloved ego, is energy which has lived in our ancestors, and which has given rise to certain past causes whose present effects condition our existence. We need generosity to modify causes and to transform effects, to wisely guide the ship of our existence and to radically transform our own life. Real effective generosity is not of the mind. Authentic sympathy, halts generosity of the heart and annihilates within us the delicious perfume of love. Fear is the root of all corruption, the secret origins of all wars, the mortal poison that degenerates and kills. School, college, and university teachers should understand the need to place their students on the path of true generosity, courage, and sincerity of the heart. The clumsy, rotten people of past generations, instead of understanding the lethal poison called fear, have cultivated it like an ill-fated flower in a greenhouse. The result of such an action has been corruption, chaos, and anarchy. Teachers should understand the critical times in which we live today and the need to build up future generations on a solid base of revolutionary ethics that is in tune with the atomic era, which in these moments of pain and suffering is dawning among the majestic sounds of thought. Fundamental education bases itself on revolutionary psychology and on revolutionary ethics in tune with the new vibrating rhythm of this new era. A sense of cooperation should totally displace the horrible battle of selfish competition. It becomes impossible to know how to cooperate when we exclude the effective and revolutionary principle of generosity. It is urgent to fully understand, not only on the intellectual level but also in the distinct unconscious corners of the subconscious mind, what the lack of generosity and the horror of selfishness is. Only by realizing what selfishness and lack of generosity really are can the delicious fragrance of true love and effective generosity, which is not of the mind, burst forth in our hearts. Chapter 13. Understanding and Memory. To remember is to try to store in the mind what other people have told us, what has happened to us, what we have here, seen or read, etc. Teachers want their students to store faithfully in their memory their words, their phrases, what is written in schoolbooks, entire chapters, heavy homeworks, etc. To pass tests means to remember what we have been told and what we have mechanically read. It means to verbalize memory, to repeat everything that we have stored in our memory like parrots. It is necessary that new generations understand that repeating everything in the memory like a record does not mean having understood anything in depth. To remember is not to understand. The memory belongs to the past. It is something dead that no longer has life. It is imperative and of great contemporary importance that all students in education really understand the deep meaning of profound understanding. To understand is something immediate, direct, something that we live intensely, something that we experience profoundly, and which inevitably is transformed into intimate means of conscious action. To remember or to recall is something dead. It belongs to the past and, unfortunately, it becomes an ideal, a motto, and idea that we want to imitate mechanically and follow unconsciously. In true understanding, in profound understanding, in intimate understanding, there is only the pressure of the conscience, constant pressure born from the essence that we carry within. Real understanding manifests itself as spontaneous, natural, and simple action, free of the depressing process of choice, pure without indecisions of any type. Understanding transformed into secret means of action is splendid, wonderful, edifying, and essentially dignifying. Calculation is the action based on recalling what we have read, the ideal we aim at, the norm of behavior that we have been taught, of the accumulated experiences in memory, etc. It depends on depressing option, it is dual, based on conceptual choice, which only leads inevitably to error and pain. To adapt action to remembrance, to try to modify action so that it coincides with memories accumulated in us, is something artificial, absurd, without spontaneity, and can inevitably only lead to error and pain. Exams can be accomplished by any fool who has a good dose of astuteness and memory. To understand subjects that have been studied and which one is going to be examined on is something very different from memorizing subjects. It belongs to true intelligence, which should not be confused with intellectualism. People who want to base all the actions of their life on ideals, theories, and memory of all types accumulated in the warehouses of the mind always go around comparing, and where comparison exists, envy also exists. People compare themselves, their children and relatives, with neighbors and neighbors' children and relatives. They compare their house, furniture, clothes, and all their material things with those of their neighbors and people in society. They compare their ideas, intelligence of their children, etc., with ideas and intelligence of other people. This results in envy, which is transformed into the hidden cause of action. Unfortunately for this world, the whole mechanism of society is based on envy and acquisition. The whole world envies the whole world. We envy ideas as things, people, and we want to acquire more and more money, new theories, new ideas that we accumulate in our memory, new things so as to dazzle our neighbors, etc. In real, true understanding, there exists true love and not mere verbalization of memory. Things we remember that which is confided to memory, soon is forgotten because memory is unfaithful. Students deposit in the warehouses of memory ideals, theories, and complete texts that are useless in practical life because in the end they disappear from memory without leaving a single trace. People who only read mechanically and enjoy storing many theories in the storerooms of memory destroy the mind, they damage it pathetically. We do not pronounce ourselves against true, profound, and conscious study based on in-depth comprehension. We only condemn antiquated methods of extemporaneous pedagogy, all mechanical systems of studying, all memorizing, etc. Remembering is superfluous where there exists true understanding. We need to study, we need useful books, teachers, spiritual guides, etc., but it is necessary to understand fully the teachings and not merely to store them in the storerooms of the unfaithful memory. We cannot be truly free as long as we commit the mistake of comparing ourselves with the stored recollections and ideals in our memory, and with what we covet to be or not to be. When we truly understand a teaching, we do not need to remember it nor convert it to an ideal. For as long there is comparison of what we are here and now, with what we want to be later on, as long as there is comparison of our practical life with an ideal or model to which we want to adapt, there cannot exist true love. All comparison is disgusting, brings fear, envy, pride, fear of not obtaining what we want, envy for others' progress, pride because we think ourselves superior to others. The important thing in practical life, whether we are ugly, envious, selfish, covetous, etc., is not to boast of being saints, but to start from absolute zero, and understand ourselves profoundly, the way we are and not the way we want to become or the way we would like to be. It is impossible to dissolve the ego, the myself, if we do not learn to observe ourselves, to perceive in order to understand what we really are here and now in an efficient and absolutely practical way. If we really want to understand, we would listen to our teachers and true spiritual guides. Young people of this generation have lost the sense of respect, of veneration towards their parents, teachers, and true spiritual guides. It is impossible to understand teachings when we do not know how to venerate and respect our parents, teachers, or spiritual guides. It is impossible to understand teachings when we do not know how to venerate and respect our parents, teachers, or spiritual guides. The simple mechanical remembering of what we have learned by heart without in-depth understanding mutilates the mind and heart, brings about envy, the fear, pride, etc. When we truly know how to listen in a profound and conscious way, within us emerges a wonderful power, an extraordinary, natural and simple understanding, free from all mechanical processes, all reasoning and remembrances. If the brain of a student is relieved from the enormous effort of memory it has to exert, it would be totally possible to teach the structure of the nucleus and the periodic table of elements to secondary students and enable high school students to understand relativity and quantum physics. As we have talked to some teachers at secondary schools, we understand that they stick with true fanaticism to the old, antiquated, and extemporaneous pedagogy. They want students to learn everything by heart even though they do not understand it. Sometimes they accept that it is better to understand than to memorize, but they insist the formulae in physics, chemistry, mathematics, etc., should be recorded in the memory. It is clear such a concept is false because when a formula of physics, chemistry, mathematics, etc., is totally understood, not only at the intellectual level but also in other levels of the mind, unconscious, subconscious, infraconscious, etc., It is not necessary to record it in the memory, as it forms part of our psyche and it can manifest itself as immediate instinctive knowledge when the circumstances of life demand it. This integral knowledge comes to give us a type of omniscience, a way of conscious, objective manifestation. In-depth understanding at all the levels of the mind is only possible through profound inner meditation. Chapter 14. Integration. One of the greatest longings in psychology is the attainment of total integration. If the ego was one, the problem of psychological integration would be resolved with the greatest of ease, but unfortunately for the world, the ego exists within each person in a pluralized form. The pluralized ego is the fundamental cause of all our intimate contradictions. If we could see ourselves in a full-length mirror the way we are psychologically with all our intimate contradictions, we would arrive at the painful conclusion that we still do not have true individuality. The human organism is a wonderful machine controlled by the pluralized ego, which is studied in depth by revolutionary psychology. I am going to read the newspaper, says an intellectual ego. I want to go to a party, exclaims an emotional ego. To hell with the party, grumbles an ego of movement. It is better if I go for a walk. I don't want to go for a walk, shouts an ego of conservation instinct. I am hungry and I am going to eat. Each of our small selves, which constitute the ego, wants to rule, wants to be the master. In the light of revolutionary psychology, we can understand that the ego is a legion, and the human organism is a machine. The many egos quarrel among themselves, they fight for supremacy, each one wanting to be the boss, the master. This explains the unfortunate state of psychological disintegration in which the poor intellectual animal mistakenly called man lives. It is necessary to understand what the word disintegration means in psychology. Disintegration is to ruin oneself, to disperse oneself, rend oneself useless, contradict oneself, etc. The principal cause of psychological disintegration is envy, which sometimes manifests itself in exquisitely subtle and delicious ways. Envy is multifaceted, and there are thousands of reasons to justify it. Envy is the secret spring of the whole social machinery. Idiots delight in justifying envy. A rich man envies the rich and wants to be richer. Poor people envy the rich and want to be rich too. He who writes envies people who write and wants to write better. He who has much experience envies the one who has more experience and desires to have more than him. People are not satisfied with bread, clothing, and shelter. The secret spring of envy for someone else's car, house, suit, money, etc., produces desires of bettering oneself, acquiring more and more things, dresses, suits, virtues, so as not to be less than others, etc. The most tragic thing of all this is that the cumulative process of experiences, virtues, things, money, etc., strengthens the pluralized ego, intensifying them the intimate contradictions, the horrifying wounds and cruel battles within us. All that is pain and cannot bring true joy to the grieving heart, all it produces is an increase of cruelty in our psyche, a multiplication of pain, discontent, each time more profound. The pluralized ego always finds justifications even for the worst of crimes, and to that process of envying, acquiring, accumulating, obtaining, even when it is at the expense of others' work, is called evolution, progress, advancement, etc. People have their conscience asleep and do not realize that they are envious, cruel, covetous, and jealous, and when for some reason they do realize all this, they justify themselves, they condemn and search for evasions, but do not understand. Envy is difficult to discover due to the concrete fact that the human mind is envious. The structure of the mind is based on envy and acquisition. Envy begins at school desks. We envy the best intelligence of our classmates, the best grades, the best suits, the best dresses, best shoes, best bicycle, etc. The teachers who are called to mold the personality of pupils should understand what the infinite processes of envy are and establish within the psyche of their students an adequate foundation for understanding. The mind, envious by nature, only thinks in the function of more. I can explain. Better, I have more knowledge, I am more intelligent, I have more virtues, more sanctifications, more perfections, more evolution, etc. All the functionalisms of the mind are based on more. The more is the intimate secret spring of envy. More is the comparative process of the mind. All comparative processes are abominable. For example, I am more intelligent than you, so and so is more virtuous than you, so and so is better than you, wiser, kinder, more beautiful, etc. The more creates time. The pluralized ego needs time to be better than the neighbor, to demonstrate to the family that he is very genial and can be someone in life, to show his enemies or those whom he envies that he is more intelligent, more powerful, stronger, etc. Comparative thinking is based on envy and produces that which is called discontent, uneasiness, bitterness. Unfortunately, people go from one opposite to another opposite, from one extreme to another. They do not know how to walk along the center. Many struggles against discontent, envy, covetousness, jealousy, but the struggle against discontent never brings true joy to the heart. It is urgent to understand that the true joy of the tranquil heart is not bought or sold, and that it is only born in us with absolute naturalness and in a spontaneous way when we have understood in depth the very causes of discontent, jealousy, envy, covetousness, etc. Those who want to obtain money, a magnificent social position, virtues, satisfactions of all types, etc., with the purpose of obtaining true contentment are totally mistaken, because all of that is based on envy, and the path of envy can never lead us to the harbor of a tranquil and contented heart. The mind imprisoned in the pluralized ego makes a virtue of envy and even gives itself the luxury of putting delicious name on it, such as progress, evolution, the longing for improvement, the struggle for dignity, etc. All of this produces disintegration, intimate contradictions, secret struggles, problems with difficult solutions, etc. It is difficult to find in life someone who is truly integral in the most complete sense of the word. It is totally impossible to obtain total integration while the pluralized ego exists within us. It is urgent to understand that within each person exists three basic factors. First, personality. Second, the pluralized ego. Third, the psychic material, that is, the very essence of the person. The pluralized ego clumsily wastes the psychological material in atomic explosions of envy, jealousy, greed, etc. It is necessary to dissolve the pluralized ego with the purpose of accumulating within the psychic material for establishing a permanent center of conscience in our interior. Whoever does not possess a permanent center of conscience cannot be integral. Only a permanent center of conscience gives us true individuality. Only a permanent center of conscience makes us integral. Chapter 15. Simplicity. It is urgent and indispensable to develop creative understanding, because it brings true freedom of living to human beings. Without understanding, it is impossible to obtain a real critical faculty of profound analysis. Teachers of schools, colleges, and universities should lead their students along the path of self-critical understanding. In our last chapter, we already broadly studied the processes of envy, whether they are religious, passionate, etc. We should have full consciousness of what envy really is, because it is only by understanding in depth and in an intimate way the infinite processes of envy that we manage to do away with jealousies of all types. Jealousy destroys marriages, friendships, and provokes religious wars, fratricidal hatreds, murders, and sufferings of all types. Envy, with all of its infinite shades, hides behind sublime purposes. There exists envy in he who, having been informed about the existence of sublime saints, Mahatmas, or gurus, desires to also become a saint. There exists envy in the philanthropist that exerts himself to surpass other philanthropists. There exists envy in every individual that covets virtues because it was reported to him, because in his mind there is data on the existence of sacred individuals filled with virtues. The desire of being a saint, of being virtuous, has envy as its basis. The saints with their virtues have caused much harm. That brings to mind the case of a man who considered himself very holy. On a certain occasion, a starving and wretched poet knocked at his door to place in his hand a lovely verse especially dedicated to the saint of our story. The poet only awaited a coin with which to buy food for his exhausted and aged body. The poet imagined everything except an insult. Great was his surprise when the saint, with a pitiful look and wrinkled brow, closed the door, telling the unfortunate poet, "Get out of here, my friend, out, out. I do not like these things, I detest flattery. I do not like the vanities of this world, this life is an illusion. I follow the path of humility and modesty." The unfortunate poet, who only desired a coin, instead received an insult from the saint, a word that hurt, a slap, and with his heart in pain and the lyric in pieces he went through the streets of the city slowly, slowly, slowly. The new generation should rise on the basis of real understanding because this is totally creative. Memory and remembrance are not creative. Memory is the grave of the past. Memory and remembrance are death. True understanding is the psychological factor of total liberation. The remembrances of the memory can never bring us true liberation because they belong to the past and therefore they are dead. Understanding is not a thing of the past nor of the future. Understanding belongs to the moment in which we are living here and now. Memory always brings an idea of the future. It is urgent to study science, philosophy, art, and religion, but studies should not be trusted to the fidelity of memory because memory is not faithful. It is absurd to store knowledge in the grave of memory. It is stupid to bury in the grave of the past the skills that we should understand. We can never pronounce ourselves against studying, wisdom, or science. However, it is absurd to store the living jewels of knowledge in the rotted grave of memory. It is necessary to study, investigate, and analyze, but we should meditate profoundly in order to understand at all the levels of the mind. A truly simple man is profoundly understandable, and he has a simple mind. The important thing in life is not what we have accumulated in the grave of our memory, but what we have understood not only on the intellectual level but also in the different unconscious, subconscious areas of the mind. Science and knowledge should be converted into immediate understanding. When knowledge and studies have been transformed into real creative understanding, then we can understand all things immediately because understanding becomes immediate, instantaneous. Complications do not exist in the mind of a simple man because all complications of the mind are due to the memory. The cunning ego that we carry within is accumulated memory. The experiences of life should be transformed into true understanding. When experiences are not transformed into understanding, when experiences continue in the memory, they constitute the putrefaction of the grave over which burns the luciferic and fatuous flame of the animal intellect. It is necessary to know that the animal intellect, totally deprived of all spirituality, is merely the verbalization of memory, a sepulchral light burning over a funeral slab. A simple man has his mind free of experiences because these have become conscience. They have been transformed into creative understanding. Death and life are found intimately associated. Only by the seed dying will the plant sprout. Only by experiencing death will understanding be born. This is a process of real transformation. A complicated man has his memory full of experiences. This shows a lack of creative understanding because when experiences are entirely understood in all levels of the mind, they cease to exist as experiences and are born as understanding. It is necessary to experience first of all, but we should not remain in the field of experiences because then the mind complicates itself and becomes difficult. It is necessary to live life intensely and to transform all experiences into real creative understanding. Those who mistakenly assume that to be understanding, simple and plain means to abandon the world, become beggars, live in isolated huts and use loincloths instead of elegant suits are totally mistaken. Many hermits, many beggars have very complicated, difficult minds. It is useless to withdraw from the world and live as hermits if the memory is full of experiences that condition the free flow of thoughts. It is useless to live as hermits, wanting to lead the life of saints, if memory is stuffed with information that has not been duly understood or made conscious in the distinct nooks, corridors, and unconscious regions of the mind. Whoever transforms intellectual information into true creative understanding and whoever transforms the experiences of life into true in-depth understanding has nothing in the memory. He lives from moment to moment filled with true fullness. He has become simple and plain even though he might live in luxurious residences inside the perimeter of urban life. Children under 6 years of age are full of simplicity and true interior beauty, due only to the living essence of life expressing itself through them in total absence of the psychological ego. We should reconquer our lost infancy in our heart and in our mind. We should reconquer innocence if we really want to be happy. Experiences in studying transformed into in-depth understanding do not leave a residue in the grave of memory, but allows us to become plain, simple, innocent, happy. In-depth meditation on experiences and acquired knowledge, the profound self-criticism, the intimate psychoanalysis, transforms everything into profound creative understanding. This is the path of real happiness born from wisdom and love. Chapter 16. Killing. To kill is evidently and undoubtedly the most destructive and most corrupt act that is known in the world. The worst form of murder consists in destroying the life or our fellow men. Dreadfully horrible is the hunter who with his shotgun murders innocent creatures of the forest, but 1,000 times more monstrous, 1,000 times more abominable is he who murders his fellow men. One not only kills with machine guns, shotguns, cannons, pistols, or atomic bombs, one can also kills with a look that wounds the heart, a humiliating look, a look full of contempt, a look filled with hate, or one can kill with an ungrateful action, with a black action, or with an insult or a wounding word. The world is full of ungrateful patricides and matricides who have murdered their fathers and mothers, whether it is with their looks, their words, or their cruel actions. The world is full of men who without knowing have murdered their wives and of wives who without knowing have murdered their husbands. Not only that, in this cruel world in which we live the human being kills what he loves most. Man does not live of bread alone, but also of various psychological factors. There are many husbands who would have been able to live longer if their wives had allowed them, and many wives who would have lived longer if their husbands allowed them. There are also many fathers and mothers who would have been able to live longer if their sons and daughters had allowed them. The illness that leads our beloved ones to the grave has as its causa causarum words that kill, looks that hurt, ungrateful actions, etc. This decrepit and degenerated society is full of unconscious murderers who boast of being innocent. Prisons are full of murderers, but the worst type of criminals boast of being innocent and go free. No type of murder can have any justification. No problem is solved in life by killing another person. Wars have never solved any problem. Nothing is solved by bombing defenseless cities and murdering millions of people. War is something that is disgusting, monstrous, and abominable. Millions of stupid, unconscious, asleep human machines go to war with the purpose of destroying so many other millions of unconscious human machines. Often a planetary catastrophe in the cosmos or an extremely bad position of stars in the sky is enough for millions of men to go to war. Human machines are not conscious of anything. They act destructively whenever a certain type of cosmic wave secretly moves them. If people would awaken conscience, if at school students were educated wisely, leading them to a conscious understanding of what enmity and war is, another day would dawn. No one would go to war and the catastrophic waves of the cosmos would be used in a different manner. War smells of cannibalism, life inside caves, bestialities of the worst kind, a bow, an arrow, a spear, an orgy of blood. In any light it is incompatible with civilization. All men in war are fearful, cowards, and the heroes filled with medals are precisely the most fearful and the most coward. A person who commits suicide also seems to be very brave, but he is a coward because he was afraid of life. A hero, at heart, is a person who commits suicide, who in an instant of supreme terror commits the folly of suicide. The madness of suicide is easily confused with heroic bravery. If we carefully observe a soldier's conduct during war, his ways, his look, his words, his steps in battle, we can see his total cowardice manifested. Teachers of school, colleges, and universities should teach their students the truth about war. They should guide their students to consciously experience that truth. If people had full conscience of what the tremendous truth about war is, if teachers knew how to educate their students wisely, no citizen would let themselves be led to the slaughterhouse. Fundamental education should be imparted immediately in all schools, colleges, and universities because it is precisely at school desks where one should work for peace. It is urgent for new generations to make themselves fully conscious of what savagery and war are. In schools, colleges, and universities, enmity and war should be understood in depth in all its aspects. New generations should understand that old people with their rancid and clumsy ideas always sacrifice young people and take them like oxen to the slaughterhouse. Young people should not let themselves be convinced by militarist propaganda nor by old people's reasons, because one reason opposes another reason and one opinion another opinion, but neither reasoning nor opinions are the truth about war. Old people have thousands of reasons to justify war and take young people to the slaughterhouse. The important thing is not the arguments over war, but experiencing the truth of what war is. We do not pronounce ourselves against reason nor against analysis. We only want to say that first of all, we should experience the truth about war, and then we can give ourselves the luxury of reasoning and analyzing. It is impossible to experience the truth about not killing if we exclude intimate, profound meditation. Only very profound meditation can lead us to experience the truth about war. Teachers should not only give intellectual information to their students, but should also teach them how to use the mind, how to experience the truth. This decrepit and degenerated race thinks of nothing but killing. This matter of killing repeatedly is only typical of a degenerated human race. The agents of crime propagate their criminal ideas via the television and cinema. Children of this generation receive daily from the television, children's stories, cinema, magazines, etc., a strong poisonous dose of murders, shooting matches, terrible crimes, etc. One cannot switch on the television without seeing words filled with hatred, bullets, and perversity. The governments of the earth are not doing anything against the propagation of crime. The minds of children and young people are being led by the agents of crime along the path of crime. The idea of killing is already so propagated, so diffused via the cinema, novels, etc., that it has become totally familiar to all the world. The rebels of this new generation have been educated for crime and kill for the pleasure of killing. They delight in seeing others die. This is what they have learnt on television, at the cinema, in novels, comics, and magazines. Crime reigns everywhere and governments do nothing to correct the instinct of killing from its very roots. It is up to teachers in schools, colleges, and universities to strongly manifest their indignation and move heaven and earth to correct this mental epidemic. It is urgent that teachers of education sound the alarm and ask all the governments of the earth for the censure of cinema, television, etc. Crime is multiplying terrible due to all these spectacles of blood, and at the rate we are going the day will come when no one will be able to walk freely in the streets without fear of being murdered. Radio, cinema, television, and magazines of blood have given such propagation to the crime of killing. They have made it so agreeable to weak and degenerated minds that the heart does not need to be tempted to put a bullet into someone or to stab another person. Because there is so much propagation of the crime of killing, weak minds have been too familiarized with crime, and now they even give themselves the luxury of killing as imitation of what they saw at the cinema or on television. Teachers who are the educators of people are obliged, in fulfillment of their duty, to struggle for the new generations, asking the governments of the earth for the prohibition of spectacles of blood, and finally the cancellation of all types of films and murders, robberies, etc. The struggle of teachers should also extend itself to bullfighting and boxing. The bullfighter is the most coward and criminal type. The bullfighter wants all the advantages for himself and kills to entertain the public. The boxer is the master of murder who, in his sadistic manner, hurts and kills to entertain the public. These types of spectacles of blood are barbaric 100%, and they stimulate minds, directing them to the path of crime. If we really want to struggle for peace in the world, we should begin a marathon campaign against spectacles of blood. While there exists destructive factors inside the human mind, there will inevitably be war. Inside the human mind there exists factors that produce war. These factors are hate, criminal instincts, militarist ideas propagated by television, radio, cinema, etc. The propaganda for peace, the Nobel Peace Prizes become absurd while there exists within man the psychological factors that produce war. Actually, many murderers have the Nobel Peace Prize. Chapter 17. Peace does not come through the mind because it does not belong to the mind. Peace is the delicious perfume of a tranquil heart. Peace is not a matter of projects, international police, United Nations, organizations of states, international treaties, or invading armies that fight in the name of peace. If we really want true peace, we should learn to live like a guard in time of war, ever alert and vigilant, with a quick and ductile mind, because peace is not a matter of romantic fantasies or beautiful dreams. If we do not learn to live in a state of alertness from moment to moment, then the path which leads to peace becomes impossible, narrow, and after having become extremely difficult, it finally ends in a dead-end alley. It is necessary to understand, urgent to know that the real peace of a tranquil heart is not a house where we arrive and find a beautiful maid happily waiting for us. Peace is not a goal, a place, etc. To pursue peace, seek it, make projects around it, fight in its name, make propaganda about it, establish organizations to work for it, etc., is totally absurd because peace is not of the mind. Peace is the marvelous perfume of a tranquil heart. Peace is not bought nor sold, neither can it be acquired with a system of appeasement, special controls, police, etc. In some countries, the national army goes through the fields, destroying towns, assassinating people, shooting supposed bandits, all this they say, in the name of peace. The result of such actions is the multiplication of savagery. Violence generates more violence. Hatred produces more hatred. Peace cannot be conquered. Peace cannot be the result of violence. Peace comes to us only when we dissolve the ego, when we destroy within us all those psychological factors that produce war. If we want peace, we must contemplate, we must study, see the entire picture and not only a corner of it. Peace is born within us when we have radically changed in an intimate way. Checkups, pro-peace organizations, peace treaties, etc., is a question of detail, points in the ocean of life. They are isolated fractions of the entire picture of existence that can never solve the problem of peace in its radical, total, and definite way. We should look at the picture in its complete form. The problem of the world is the problem of the individuals. If the individuals do not have peace within society, the world will live in inevitable war. School, college, and university teachers should work for peace unless they leave savagery and violence. It is urgent and indispensable to show students of the new generation the path to follow, the intimate path that can take us with precise accuracy to the real peace of a tranquil heart. People cannot understand fully what true inner peace is and only desire not to be disturbed or bothered, even when they, on their own account, assume the right to hinder, bother, and make bitter the lives of their fellow human beings. People have never experienced true peace and only have absurd opinions, romantic ideals, and mistaken concepts about the latter. For thieves, peace would be to steal without the police crossing their way. For smugglers, peace would be to be able to smuggle their goods everywhere without being stopped by the authorities. For those who prey on people, peace would be to be able to sell at an expensive price, exploiting left and right, without being stopped by government inspectors. For prostitutes, peace would be enjoyment in beds of pleasure, freely exploiting men without health authorities or the police intervening in their lives. In his mind, each person forms 50,000 absurd fantasies about peace. Each person tries to raise around himself a selfish wall of false ideas, beliefs, opinions, and absurd concepts about what peace is. Each person wants peace his way, according to his cravings, likes, habits, mistaken customs, etc. Each person wants to lock himself within a fantastic protective wall, with the purpose of living his own mistakenly conceived peace. People fight for peace, they desire it, they want it, but they do not know what peace is. People only want not to be hindered in order to be able to do their mischief calmly and at ease. That is what they call peace. It does not matter what mischief people do, each person believes what he is doing is good. People find justification even for the worst of crimes. If the drunkard is sad, he drinks because he is sad. If the drunkard is happy, he drinks because he is happy. The drunkard will always justify the habit of alcoholism. All people are like this. They find justification for every crime. Nobody considers himself perverse. All people boast of being just and honest. There are many vagabonds that mistakenly suppose that peace is to live, very tranquil and effortlessly without working, in a world full of marvelous romantic fantasies. There are millions of wrong opinions and concepts about peace. In this painful world in which we live, each person seeks his fantastic peace, the peace of his opinions. People want to see in the world the peace of their dreams, their special type of peace, although within, each person carries in his interior the psychological factors that produce wars and enmity of all kinds. In these times of world crisis, everybody who wants to become famous founds a pro-peace organization, makes propaganda, and becomes a paladin of peace. We must not forget that many political foxes have won the Nobel Peace Prize even when there exists an entire cemetery on their account, and they have in one form or another secretly ordered the assassination of many people when they have seen themselves in danger of being eclipsed. There are also many true masters of humanity who have sacrificed themselves, teaching everywhere on earth the doctrine for the dissolution of the ego. These masters know by personal experience that only by dissolving the Mephistopheles that we carry within, does peace of the heart arrive within us. While hatred, covetousness, envy, jealousy, the spirit of acquisition, ambition, anger, pride, etc., exist within each individual, wars will inevitably exist. We know many people in the world who boast of having found peace. When we have studied these people in depth, we have been able to see that they do not even remotely know peace and that they merely locked themselves up within some consoling and solitary habit, or within a special belief, etc. However, truly these people have not even remotely experienced what true peace of the tranquil heart is. Really, these people have only made up an artificial peace, which, in their ignorance, they confuse for the real peace of heart. It is absurd to seek peace within the mistaken walls of our prejudices, beliefs, preconceptions, desires, habits, etc. While the psychological factors that produce enmities, disagreements, problems, and wars exist within the mind, true peace will not exist. Real peace comes from legitimate beauty, wisely understood. The beauty of a tranquil here exhales the delicious perfume of true inner peace. It is urgent to understand the beauty of language. It is necessary for our words to carry the substance of sincerity. We should never use disharmonious, gross, and absurd words. Each word should be a true symphony. Each phrase should be pregnant with spiritual beauty. It is as bad to speak when one should be silent as it is to be silent when one should speak. There are unlawful silences and infamous words. There are times when talking is a crime, and there are times when keeping silent is another crime. One should talk when one is supposed to talk and be silent when one should be silent. Let us not play with words because they are a serious responsibility. Each word should be weighed before being pronounced because each can produce in the world much usefulness and much uselessness, much benefit or much harm. We should watch our gestures, manners, dress, and all types of actions. May our gestures, dress, way of sitting at the table, behavior at dinner, manner of treating people in our living room, in the office, on the street, etc., be always full of beauty and harmony. It is necessary to understand the beauty of kindness, to feel the beauty of good music, to love the beauty of creative art, to readjust our manner of thinking, feeling, and acting. Supreme beauty can only be born in us when the ego has died in a radical, total, and definite manner. We are ugly, horrible, disgusting, as long as the psychological ego is alive within us. Fullness of beauty is impossible while the psychological ego exists within us. If we want real peace, we should reduce the ego to cosmic dust. Only thus will there be inner beauty within us. From that beauty there will be born within us the charm of love and the true peace of the tranquil heart. Creative peace brings order within oneself, eliminates confusion, and fills us with true happiness. It is necessary to know that the mind cannot understand what true peace is. It is urgent to understand that the peace of a tranquil heart does not come to us through effort or from belonging to any society or organization dedicated to making propaganda for peace. Real peace comes to us in a totally natural and simple way, when we reconquer innocence in the mind and in the heart, when we become like delicate and beautiful children, as sensitive to everything beautiful as well as to everything ugly, to everything good as well as to everything bad, to all that is sweet as well as to all that is bitter. It is necessary to reconquer the lost childhood, as much in the mind as in the heart. Peace is something vast, huge, infinite, not something formed by the mind. It cannot be the result of a whim nor the product of an idea. Peace is an atomic substance that is beyond good and evil, a substance that is beyond all morality, substance that emanates from the very core of the Absolute. Chapter 18. Truth. From childhood and youth there begins the Calvary of our miserable existence, with mental twists, intimate family tragedies, vexations in the home and at school, etc. It is clear that in childhood and youth, with few exceptions, all these problems do not manage to affect us in a really profound way, but when we have become mature people the questions begin. Who am I? Where do I come from? Why do I have to suffer? What is the aim of this existence? Etc. Every person on the path of life has asked himself these questions. Everyone at some time has wanted to investigate, inquire, find out the why of so many sorrows, troubles, struggles, and sufferings, but unfortunately, we always end up imprisoned in some theory, in some opinion, in some belief, in what the neighbor says, in what some decrepit old man replied, etc. We have lost our true innocence and the peace of a tranquil heart, and because of this we are not capable of directly experimenting the truth in all its harshness. We depend on what others might say, and it is clear that we are on the wrong path. The capitalist society radically condemns the atheists, those who do not believe in God. The Marxist-Leninist society condemns those who do believe in God, but, in essence, both things are the same, a matter of opinions, people's whims, mental projections. Neither credulity or incredulity or skepticism means having experienced the truth. The mind can give itself the luxury of believing, doubting, of forming opinions, conjecturing, etc., but that is not experiencing the truth. We can also give ourselves the luxury of believing in the sun or of not believing in it and even doubting of its existence, but the king star will continue giving light and life to everything existing without giving the least importance to our opinions. Behind blind belief, behind incredulity and skepticism hide many shades of morals and many mistaken concepts of false morals in whose shadow the ego is strengthened. The capitalist type of society and the communist type of society each has in its own manner and according to its whims, prejudices and theories, its special type of morals. What is moral within the capitalist bloc is immoral within the communist bloc and vice versa. Morals depend on customs, on the place, on the era. What is moral in one country is immoral in another country, and what in one era was moral is immoral in another era. Morals do not have any essential value. Analyzing them in depth, they are 100% stupid. Fundamental education does not teach morals. Fundamental education teaches revolutionary ethics, and that is what the new generations need. Since the terrifying night of the centuries, in all the ages, there were always men who withdrew from the world to search for the truth. It is absurd to withdraw from the world to search for the truth, because the truth is found within the world and within a man here and now. Truth is the unknown from moment to moment, and it is not by separating ourselves from the world, nor by abandoning our fellow men, that we can discover it. It is absurd to say that all truth is half-truth, and that all truth is half-error. Truth is radical, and it is, or it is not. It can never be halves, it can never be half-error. It is absurd to say that truth is of time, and that what was at one time is not in another time. Truth has nothing to do with time. Truth is not temporary. The ego is time, and so it cannot know the truth. It is absurd to assume conventional, temporary, relative truths. People confuse concepts and opinions with that which is truth. Truth has nothing to do with opinions or with so-called conventional truths, because these are only unimportant projections of the mind. Truth is the unknown from moment to moment and can only be experienced in the absence of the psychological ego. Truth is not a matter of sophisms, concepts, opinions. Truth can only be known through direct experience. The mind can only form opinions, and opinions have nothing to do with the truth. The mind can never conceive the truth. Teachers at schools, colleges, and universities should experience truth and show the path to their students. Truth is a matter of direct experience, not a matter of theories, opinions, or concepts. We can and we should study, but it is urgent to experience for oneself and in a direct manner what truth there is in each theory, concept, opinion, etc. We should study, analyze, inquire, but we also need with urgency, without delay, to experience the truth contained in everything that we study. It is impossible to experience the truth while the mind is disturbed, convulsed, distressed by opposing opinions. It is only possible to experience the truth when the mind is quiet, when the mind is in silence. Teachers at schools, colleges, and universities should point out to their students the path of profound internal meditation. The path of profound internal meditation leads to stillness and silence of the mind. When the mind is quiet, empty of thoughts, desires, opinions, etc., when the mind is in silence, truth comes to us. Thank you.